Okay, welcome everybody to this week's video that's going to be on the topic of extending from closing opposition on LSE Open Round 1. This is going to be actually a video of me actually extending on this motion and basically what my thought process was and what my strategy was. And I'm going to try to simulate it as much as I can within this motion breakdown video. Obviously, there might be, like if you're watching and you were in the round with me, there might be some inconsistencies, but that's only because, some time has passed. This is like, I think 2 or 3 weeks after the competition because, there was Sophia Open. I also wanted to do my argumentation and judging module. But I'm happy to do one of these videos again. Cool. So, the motion was, I'm not going to read the info slide, you can pause our video right here, but basically this house would ban faith-based schools in Western liberal democracies. And I'm going to try to simulate this as much as I can, as if it were to be actual prep and you to be prepping with me while I'm going about it. So the first and most obvious thing that you need to do in this debate is like generate ideas, and since you're closing opposition, as many ideas it would be good to have as many ideas as possible. So the two ideas that we end up generating, that we end up running, was firstly that faith-based education deters bad behavior, and secondly that this will lead to more donations to education from wealthy individuals that are religious and would exclusively donate to such schools. So we also had some other ideas. We had the principled right. We had also, that they'll still like make you religious or still teach you religious teaching, but they'll teach you in a worse manner, and kids will be bullied. All of these three ideas are like low burden ideas and are most likely to be taken or at least touched upon by an opening opposition within the debate, which is what we outlined. Like this is maybe the bullying point is a bit more, but like if in general, if you're thinking about it, then these are the 2 to 3 ideas that you'll most likely run from an opening opposition. Cool. So after me and my partner went through these types of ideas, we decided, well, most likely what they're not going to run is they're not going to run the it deters bad behavior points, because these people are most likely super liberal, and to them sex and drugs are cool and they can never be a bad thing. And the funding education point, which is a bit more niche. So that was our decision making process. Plus, these arguments are also require a lot more explanations to be explained. Cool. So after that, it's good to talk at least a little bit as to what is most likely to happen in the top half. And this is like kind of a summary, but also something that you could kind of guess what happened, so that you can understand how the process of position and extension work. So basically, opening government were a completely new team. They really didn't know what they were doing, so they weren't really a threat at all. Like they were making statement-based arguments, so they weren't like something worth us wasting our time on them. Like, sorry guys if you're watching, but it was just the truth. Like you guys didn't substantiate your claims, and you guys don't seem to understand debating basics. Opening opposition didn't really also substantiate their claims either. Like they had bits of pieces of analysis here and there and some impacts. If like the concrete summarization of their case was, their bullying point was just an example. I think it was literally, if you're wearing a hijab, they may bully you. The religions will be, you will teach kids religion, but in a worse way. Didn't have a comparative analysis, i.e., why this doesn't happen in the alternative. Like, why won't it anyway happen? Which is the obvious response that either opening government, but in this case, closing government, gave to them, which nullified the argument. The principle was strong, but it wasn't really properly weighed. It only functioned against opening government that ran the principle that we should ban these schools. Their principle, obviously, people have a right to beat at that. So bottom line is, these claims weren't particularly strong. All of these things were legitimate extension paths for me. But since I had a judge who I really didn't know, and I had no idea how they adjudicated, I decided to opt into the less risky strategy of just running a separate extension and trying to weigh and win that, instead of trying to vertically explain these points and me being called derivative, which is still a risk to this day. Even though people think I have tons of rep, this happens to me. So basically, bottom line is, Opening opposition clearly wins the top half, but neither is a substantial threat. Just pointing out these problems to the arguments should be reason enough as to why you shouldn't buy them. Any reasonable judge should be able to see this, especially if you watch the judging module. What does CG do? So the CG basically runs the principle as to how religion and studying religion in particularly is immoral. It's fairly well proven, and most of their time is spent there. And the second thing is that these schools most likely create radicalism, but this wasn't significantly well proven. I think they spent a minute on it, and they ended up not weighing it. So conclusion, this was the clear threat. This was the clear threat in the round. So basically, what ends up happening is if we beat closing government, then we should be good against the other two teams. That's the bottom line. So what was our strategy in extending if we're running the this deters bad behavior point? So basically it has to have 4 components. The first is we need to start by weighing this against the principle, i.e. why the benefits of religion are much better than in potential indoctrination that you may happen. So this is establishing a path to victory with the extension, what the extension does, or positioning of the extension. Secondly, proving how religion stops bad behavior. Thirdly, proving how you get more funding and how that leads to a greater ability to self-actualize, and then impact it and remind the judge that you had the weighing in the beginning, so that they can connect the whole thing into one giant one giant pie that you serve to them in this moment. So this is the strategy, and this is how, in general, I broke down my notes, and here's how I built up this argument. So the first thing is to establish the weighing and the path to victory. And I guess the question here might be, okay, but isn't this the job of the second speaker? Not necessarily, because firstly, many people don't listen to whips, unfortunately, especially like not so good judges who just literally they make the decision while the whip is speaking. They do this even at in-person competition. You can see them like when they're waving the list like this, and you're like, okay, yeah, that guy is making the decision right now. He's not listening to the whip at all. But also, secondly, this is the initial part where you have the chance to grab the judge's attention. So establishing this path to victory is good. Secondly, and this is my comment to some of my viewers. Some of you, by the way, are in the recorded videos as well. I think you guys don't necessarily understand what path to victory means. It's not a headline that if you just say it and then proceed to explain your arguments, you automatically win. No. You need to provide justification as to why this is the path to victory, why this is something that would win the debate for you. Not just say we believe that. So here are the 2 examples. Just saying we believe that this deters bad behavior and this is the path to victory. Stop and then proceed to explain the point. Versus we believe this is the path to victory. Here is why this is the path to victory. Blah 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 blah. After we've proven this is the path to victory, let's prove the argument. All we have to do is prove the argument. So these 2 things are different. So how did we end up doing it? So basically, we pointed out to the 2 key things. Religion stops negative behavior like smoking, drinking, skipping class, getting into the gang, having sex. And it also, religion incentivizes good behavior like studying, being nice to people, working hard, and things like this. And ultimately, these benefits, especially if you're a kid, trickle down to good things for you, trickle down to more education, more career development, more opportunities in the future, and staying away from bad things like becoming a drug addict, alcoholic, getting into a gang and doing this type of thing. So why would we trade off these things? And this is the crucial question that you would ask. So why would we prefer to have religious indoctrination but have the benefits of living a better life, becoming a better human, and things like that? We gave 2 reasons as to why that's the case. The first is reversibility, i.e. you can deal with the trauma of indoctrination by, for example, later in your life, you can, for example, leave the religion. Later in the life, you can seek therapy. You can also talk with people, and you can, for example, take this as a timely process. Maybe it will take 2-3 years, but you can remove yourself from this type of indoctrination. But in order to do this, you require cash. Like, you require a stable job. You require yourself to be a fairly functioning person within society to reverse these type of things. The thing that you can't reverse is harms that are associated with your development as a person. So, for example, if you're 16 and you get pregnant and you have a child, and you can't, for example, study, and all your life you have to work very low socioeconomic jobs, you can't achieve therapy. You can't like buy therapy. You can't like escape the religion because you don't have capacity to do this anyway. You can't also escape your own circumstances. This is just one example. Another example is if you become a narc, like, or you start drinking alcohol, you can't escape that, and all of these type of things. So based on reversibility of harms, we would prefer one harm versus the other. But secondly, also intensity of harms, i.e. Things like drugs, alcohol, depression, having to take care of a kid when you're like 16, 17, 18, all these things are horrible to you. They cause you immense harms, sometimes physical harms because you get into violence, for sure mental harms, and in certain cases material harms, because you can't afford to buy something for your kids, and you can't afford to take care of people. We also explained that this is likely because in most cases, people who go to religious schools in Western liberal democracies are either migrants, or there is a correlation between you being a low socioeconomic background and being religious, because you need some kind of explanation as a justification as to why this weighing is likely, also not just why it works. That I didn't put in the slide, and I only now remembered, but as I'm recalling the round. But this is also crucial to explain why does this weighing work and things like that. Cool. So after you set up the path to victory, literally all you have to do is prove the argument, because you already explained why the argument wins the debate. Cool. So the first burden on this argument is, how does religion stop bad behavior in general? There are broadly two sets of mechanisms as to how this is, why this is true. The first is the carrot, or like direct rewards. So for example, telling you, you will go into heaven if you live a virtuous life. Good things will happen to you because you have good karma, things like that. And the stick, so like negative rewards, or God will send you to hell, or bad things will happen to you if you have bad karma, and things like this. And ultimately, this is an extremely strong incentive mechanism, because it creates very deep emotions within human beings, especially for kids that are very young and impressionable, because it causes things like fear, stress, anxiety, and things like that cause you to be virtuous, that cause you to do good things and to not do bad things. But then it is important to note that there is a second burden here. That is, why is sin or sinning very easy to get in? And there are broadly three reasons here. The first is that it's literally everywhere, especially if you're a kid zoomer nowadays. Like, you see it on TikTok, Netflix, like you watch shows like Euphoria and shit like that. You see it on social media. Kids in general around you are super sinful. They think it's cool to, like, for example, go smoke cigarettes, drink, skip class, not study, and all of these type of things. Like, you don't have to prove this structurally. The average informed voter knows that this is the behavior of most kids, and know that this is something that they do. Like, otherwise, you're not living on the same planet. But also, like, it's very easy for kids to get scammed, because kids are not the smartest. Their hormones are on fire. In general, they like to question authority figures. In general, they like to be rebellious and do things like that. And finally, it's just cool. Like, it gives you short-term pleasure when you engage in things like sex, drinking, skipping class. You feel very cool about yourself. So there is a huge pressure on you to participate in these negative behaviors and to participate and to engage in this type of things. Yes, religion can deter you, but in order to balance out this pressure, you need the schools as a factor, which is the third burden, which is why religious schools specifically. So there are a couple of reasons here. The first is, and this is the strongest reason, is that teachers will be a religious authority versus a secular authority in the alternative. So presumably kids will also go to school in the alternative, except this time the school will be secular. Firstly, you as a kid are much more likely to agree and see yourself, like see connecting patterns between you and the religious teacher that is in front of you. I.e., for example, maybe it's a woman that has a hijab. Maybe they're the same ethnicity as you. Maybe the way they speak and the manner of that they're using is something that you're accustomed to and is something you believe it. Versus a secular teacher who may be majority ethnic, who doesn't know how to talk to you, who you may not necessarily respect or have an authority for, when they tell you, like, don't do bad things and things like that. Whereas on the comparative, when you have, let's say, a Muslim or a Christian teacher who tells you, no, God will punish you if you do this, you're much more likely to listen. But secondly, they're much more context aware. Like, they may understand different struggles that you may have because they're from your background. Like, let's say what it's like to be a poor person, what it's like to be a migrant, what it's like to experience racism or religious racism and things like that a secular teacher cannot. Like, they could, at the best case, try to do it, obviously, but they'll never have the correct approximation, correct words that will do this. Meaning that the strength of the teacher and the capacity of them for them to influence you is much, much greater when we're talking about the religious one. Secondly, is that school is a huge part of a kid's life. Like you are, like if you think about it, like constant reinformation, I misread that, creates repetition, right? Like if you are constantly in classes where, for example, it's talked about what it's like to be virtuous, it's talked about what it's like to be good, it's talked about what is evil and things like that, or just straight up have like multiple religious seminars or classes within you, the signaling or the intensity of information that is distilled for you is much greater in comparison to, for example, you only being showcased religion in the weekends on Sunday church, or your parents, having jobs, meaning that they can't necessarily teach you and things like that, which means that there is a great degree of extent and amount of information that you're being fed to. So given the persuasive ability of religion is the same, but the amount and the quantity of information that you're being put in is much, much more different, even though the first part explains why it isn't the same. And finally, like you can just get into much more details in class, specifically about religion. You can answer questions that the kids may have. You can make it more engaging to them. Whereas in a church or in a mosque, you have to adhere to the lowest common denominator, or everyone, which means that you, for example, can't necessarily get into answering much questions. Maybe the child may have, for example, some kind of questioning towards religion, like asking themselves, okay, but what is this? And then the teacher can answer, thus reaffirming their religion, thus keeping them still believing in good virtues and good values and things like that. Bottom line, this drastically increases the probability of you not sinning or you not engaging in this bad behavior. So this is the first mechanism done. The second mechanism is about funding, which is about rich people that are from the religion want to give only to religious schools specifically. Why is this the case? Firstly, because most likely these people think that secular education is corrupt. They hear, like as a baseline, they study things in secular schools like evolution, that goes strictly direct against the religious tenets. There's also a perception that, for example, they teach new modern left stuff, like, for example, gender is not important and things like that, that is directly antithetical to a much more conservative religion interpretation of things. And secondly, there are other forces that tell them this. Like, even if this is not true, even if this is completely fake, certain actors like Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, and things like that have a vested interest in perpetuating such a narrative and overexposing and showing this type of thing towards them, meaning that they don't want to put their money in secular schools because they'll view that as sinful or them being corrupt, and they will specifically want to give them to religious schools because they have the security that this money will go into the teaching of things that they deem good or they deem normal and things like that. So what would this money go through? For example, this money could go to many things: sports buildings, science labs, new more modern things, like, for example, you having tablets or laptops that could be school bought and things like that, that deeply improve the secular aspect of education, also not just the non-secular but also the secular aspect. And this is important because usually in these minority communities where they're not like the most crucial voter base or something like that, they don't really get the most funding, or they aren't as rich, so this additional funding mechanism is like allows them to access even secular education. And then we reach to part 4, which is the impacts. The impacts are: this means that you stay away from bad behavior in your formative years, where mistakes have huge impacts on you. Examples like getting pregnant, skipping class, becoming a narc. All of this like lowers your function in society. All of this lowers your capacity to self-actualize, to get a job. And ultimately, this leads to a second thing, which is lowering your chance of getting a higher education, university, or at least like a trade school, to get like some kind of socioeconomic mobility on you. You're less likely to get hired. You're likely to get hired for like low socioeconomic economic jobs and things like that. All of this means that your life as an individual and the life of people around you, whether it's like your parents or your future children, will be comparatively much worse because you don't have the agency to self-actualize into these types of societies. This wins the debate because it proves that this is a greater harm than indoctrination. And then we go back to the weighing that we gave in the initial part. And that's it. after that, we should be able to win the debate, because we've set up a clear comparative, clear path to victory. We traded off our harms, and we ended up proving them within the debate. So this is the strategy of closing opposition. So if you think about it, it's very simple. It's just, you don't have all the time in the world. Your number one objective is pushing out the extension. You don't necessarily have to respond to them, but for sure what you can do is explain why your case beats their case. If your case, for example, doesn't necessarily beat them and you have to respond to that, then for sure give some rebuttal. But in general, this is the theory and the practice of doing it. Hope this was helpful. See you in the next video.